right now, like as you were listening to this, your body is quietly dissolving your own skeleton.
Yeah, which sounds terrifying.
It really does. But it is literally breaking down your bone tissue
Yeah.
just to keep this tiny, incredibly precise amount of calcium flowing through your bloodstream. Because if that calcium level drops by even a fraction, your heart simply stops beating.
I know, it sounds like a horror movie, but it's really just standard biological operating procedure. I mean, we are so conditioned to think of calcium as this, inert, boring building material.
Right, like bricks in a wall.
Exactly, or like that wholesome glass of milk from those old 1990s television commercials. But the reality of what it's doing inside you is what's far more aggressive.
And the consequences of getting it wrong are oh yeah, the goal here is to extract the real aha moments about how it actually works in your body, the right and wrong ways to take it, and some medical plot twists that completely caught me off guard.
Some of the studies really are wild.
They really are. Okay, let's unpack this, because before we get into the whole, strategy of supplementation, we really have to break down what calcium's actually doing on a cellular level.
Right, so it helps to visualize where it actually lives. The vast majority of the calcium in your body, like about 99% of it, is stored exactly where you'd expect.
In your bones and teeth, right?
Yeah, in your bones and teeth. But those bones aren't static. They aren't just a finished marble statue that just sits there.
Right. They are more like a massive, constantly active construction site. There's this endless 247 cycle called remodeling, right?
Yes, remodeling.
Right.
Your body uses specialized cells to tear down old microdamaged bone tissue and then uses other cells to lay down fresh calcium and build new bone.
It's just wild that that's happening right now. And that entire construction project is completely managed by vitamin D, isn't it?
Totally. It is absolutely essential. If you don't have enough vitamin D, the body simply cannot absorb calcium from your gut. So, the building materials never make it to the site, and the whole remodeling process just fails.
It basically grinds to a halt.
Exactly. Now, when we're young, this process works heavily in our favor. We deposit way more calcium than we lose. In mid-adulthood, it kind of plateaus. But as we age, the demolition crew starts working faster than the building crew.
So the depletion outpaces the absorption.
Right. Which is particularly true for postmenopausal women, leading to a dramatically increased risk of osteoporosis.
Okay, so that's the 99%.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about the remaining 1%, because honestly, this is the secret MVP of your entire biology.
Oh, absolutely.
That tiny fraction is floating in your blood, your muscles, and like the fluid between your cells.
And without that 1%, human physiology just fails. I mean, think about your nervous system. For your brain to send a message to your hand to pick up a coffee cup, calcium has to physically rush into the nerve cells to trigger the release of neurotransmitters.
Wow. So it is the literal chemical spark that allows your brain to communicate.
It is. And it's also responsible for muscle contraction.
Right. And not just like your biceps, but the smooth muscles, right? The ones in your blood vessels that expand and contract, and obviously the cardiac muscle keeping your heart beating.
Precisely. Which brings us back to your opening thought about the body dissolving its own skeleton. Because that 1% in the blood is non-negotiable for immediate survival, your body will do whatever it takes to maintain it.
Okay, so think of your bones not just as structural scaffolding, but as a bustling bank. That 1% in your blood is the cash you need for daily survival expenses.
That's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah, so your body is making constant deposits and withdrawals from the bone bank to keep that cash in circulation. Because if the 1% runs out, the brain and heart just shut down.
And that biological prioritization is a massive trap.
Yeah.
Because there are no warning lights on the dashboard,
What do you mean?
Well, if your daily diet is deficient in calcium, you won't feel fatigued. You won't get a headache. You won't feel anything at all in the short term.
Because the body just quietly visits the ATM.
Yeah.
It just robs the bone bank.
Exactly. It prioritizes keeping your heart beating today over keeping your hips strong 10 years from now. So, over a long period, the silent theft leads straight to osteopenia, which is low bone density, and eventually osteoporosis.
It's an entirely silent disease, right up until the day a bone suddenly fractures.
Yeah, that's often the very first symptom.
That is so scary. So if the theft is completely silent, how do we effectively restock the vault? Food is obviously the first line of defense, right? Dairy is the heavy hitter. Milk, yogurt, cheddar, mozzarella. But for anyone dairy-free, you've got soy milk, sardines, tofu, kale, turnip greens, and like fortified orange juice and cereals.
which is a great list.
Mhm.
But the reality is, bridging the gap with food alone is incredibly difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, which is why millions of people turn to supplements. And this is where things get biochemically complicated.
Very complicated.
Because look, I've stood in the pharmacy aisle staring at the wall of options. It is completely overwhelming. You've got gluconate, lactate, phosphate. But the two main players in all the clinical data are calcium carbonate and calcium citrate.
Right, those are the big two.
And I'll admit, I used to think it was just marketing. Like, why does the actual chemical compound matter so much?
It matters because of how your gastrointestinal tract actually processes them. So calcium carbonate is essentially an alkaline compound. It's basically like chalk.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, so to break the molecular bond and actually absorb the calcium, your stomach has to blast it with a significant amount of hydrochloric acid. Therefore, you absolutely must take it with food to trigger that acid production.
And if you don't, like if you take it on an empty stomach,
If you don't, it basically just sits in your gut undigested. And even when taken properly, carbonate is the form most famous for causing severe gas, bloating, and constipation.
yikes. Okay, so what makes calcium citrate different?
Well, citrate already contains an acidic component built right into its molecular structure, so it doesn't rely entirely on your stomach acid to break it down.
Meaning you can take it on an empty stomach.
Exactly. You can take it without food. It is vastly superior for, well, older adults whose stomach acid naturally declines, or people taking acid reflux medications, or anyone with GI absorption problems or inflammatory bowel disease.
That makes total sense. And you often see these supplements combined with magnesium too, right?
Yes, magnesium often acts as a catalyst to help assimilate the calcium.
Good to know. But let's get into the actual daily requirements, because it needs vary wildly. I saw that infants start at like 200 to 260 milligrams, kids age 1 to 3 need 700, and teenagers from 9 to 18 need a massive 1,300 milligrams.
Because they are actively building that bone bank.
Right. And then for average adults from ages 19 to 50, the baseline drops back to 1,000 milligrams a day.
And then it diverges again. Men aged 51 to 70 can stay at that 1,000 milligram baseline.
But women change.
Yeah, women in that exact same 51 to 70 age bracket need to bump it up to 1,200 milligrams to combat that postmenopausal bone loss we talked about.
Got it. And then once anyone, male or female, hits 71, the target is 1,200 milligrams across the board.
Exactly.
Okay, here is where I want to push back on behalf of everyone listening who is incredibly busy. Wait, if I need 1,000 milligrams a day, why can't I just take one giant pill with my morning coffee and be done with it?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's because biology demands a steady stream, not a flood. Your body physically cannot process it all at once. Yeah, the clinical data reveals a hard biological ceiling. Your gut can only absorb about 500 milligrams of calcium at any single time.
So if I swallow a 1,000 milligram horse pill, I'm just creating expensive waste.
It's actually worse than that. Think of your intestinal wall as like a highly regulated toll booth. You have these specialized transport proteins acting as the toll attendants.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
There are only so many attendants working at one time, so if you send 500 milligrams of calcium through, traffic flows smoothly. If you dump 1,000 milligrams all at once, the attendants get completely overwhelmed.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. The remaining 500 milligrams just bypasses the toll booth, stays right there in your digestive tract, and that is exactly what triggers the severe constipation and bloating people complain about.
Wow. Okay, so you absolutely must split your doses. Like, take 500 milligrams in the morning and 500 in the evening.
Yes, you have to split them to 2 different times during the day.
But that brings us to the human element. The science gives us these perfect, neat little rules, but real life is messy. We know how we should take it, but how do people actually take it?
Yeah, human error totally derails the clinical strategy.
Yeah.
There was a fascinating 2015 study out of the Czech Republic that tracked 49 older women.
Okay.
Now, these women already had osteoporosis, meaning their risk of a catastrophic fracture was massive. The researchers prescribed them calcium and vitamin D, but instead of just asking if they took it, they used electronic monitoring devices to track them.
Wow, so no hiding from the pill bottle.
Exactly. And the overall compliance was a dismal 71%.
Which means roughly a third of the time, the bone bank is operating in a complete deficit.
Yeah.
But the part of that study that genuinely shocked me was the drug holidays.
Yes, the drug holiday.
71% of these women went more than 3 consecutive days without taking a single supplement.
And remember, these are high-risk patients. But the researchers uncovered a behavioral trick in the timing that is incredibly actionable for you listening. They found that women who incorporated their supplements into an afternoon or evening routine had an 82% compliance rate.
Oh, wow. And the others?
Those who tried to take it in the morning or right before bed, compliance plummeted down to just 51%.
So the mechanics of our daily routine completely dictate the medical outcome. It's easier to remember with lunch or dinner than in the chaotic morning rush.
Exactly.
But we should probably address why people abandon their supplements, beyond just forgetting. People are terrified of the side effects.
Yeah.
We know too much calcium interferes with the body's ability to absorb iron and zinc, but the biggest fear is always kidney stones.
And that fear is well-founded, but it's deeply misunderstood. High intakes of calcium from supplements are indeed strongly associated with an increased risk of kidney stones.
Wait, hold on. The research explicitly states that high intake from food does not cause kidney stones. Why on earth would the body treat the exact same mineral differently just because one comes from a pill and one comes from a piece of cheese?
It comes down to velocity. Yeah, when you take a highly concentrated supplement, it rapidly dissolves and creates this massive, sudden spike of calcium in your bloodstream.
Okay.
Your kidneys, whose job is to filter the blood, they panic. They see this massive spike, assume it's a toxic overload, and aggressively dump all that excess calcium into your urine where it crystallizes into stones.
And food doesn't do that.
No, because food requires complex digestion. The calcium in kale or dairy is bound up in proteins and fats. It digests slowly, releasing a gentle, manageable trickle of calcium into the blood over several hours. The kidneys easily process it.
That is wild.
Yep.
Okay, speaking of side effects, we have to talk about constipation. Here's where it gets really interesting. There was a 2016 pilot study in Florida designed to test this exact complaint.
Right, I remember this one.
They gave 27 healthy women calcium twice a day with meals for 2 weeks and meticulously tracked their gastrointestinal mobility. The result, 0 difference in stool frequency. They basically concluded calcium doesn't cause constipation.
But we really need to look at the fine print of their methodology there.
Yes, because they only gave these women 250 milligrams twice a day. That's a total of 500 milligrams, which is literally half the required adult dose. Even the researchers themselves admitted at the end of the paper that a standard, higher dose might have totally wrecked their digestion.
It perfectly illustrates how real-world application often clashes with clinical ideals.
Definitely.
If you are someone at high risk for low calcium like teenagers, postmenopausal women, people avoiding dairy, or those with eating disorders or kidney disease, you have to be incredibly strategic about when and how you supplement to avoid giving up.
Right. You must split that dose, choose the citrate form if your digestion is sensitive, and time it right. All right, we've established the baseline of bone health and daily intake. Now, I want to dive into a lightning round of recent clinical trials.
Let's do it.
Because these show calcium doing wildly unexpected things, both good and bad throughout the body.
We should probably acknowledge the massive fracture win first, just to confirm the baseline.
Oh, for sure. The 2016 U.S. meta-analysis. They reviewed data from nearly 31,000 participants. And for context, 53.6 million older Americans have low bone mass, and fractures cost $19 billion annually.
It's a huge issue, but the intervention worked. Supplementing with calcium and vitamin D produced a 15% reduction in total fractures and a staggering 30% reduction in hip fractures.
Which are often the most debilitating for older adults. So the fundamental promise is true. But let's leave the skeleton behind to look at the cardiovascular system, because this is where the plot twists begin.
Yeah, this was surprising.
Right. A 2014 South African review of over 2,200 pregnant women looked at preeclampsia, which is characterized by dangerous spikes in blood pressure. They found that even low-dose calcium, under a gram a day, was just as good as a high dose at effectively preventing it.
And it's not just in pregnancy. A 2015 trial in Iran looked at 75 healthy young women with low calcium diets. They supplemented them with 1,000 milligrams a day for a month, and it significantly lowered their diastolic blood pressure.
Okay, I have to stop you there. How does a bone mineral lower blood pressure? What is the actual mechanism?
Remember that 1% floating in the blood?
Yeah.
We mentioned it regulates smooth muscle. Well, your blood vessels are lined with smooth muscle. Calcium gradients govern the electrical signals that tell those vessels to either clamp down or relax.
Oh, I see.
When your systemic calcium levels are optimized, the vessels are able to relax properly, reducing the resistance to blood flow, which mechanically lowers that diastolic pressure.
That is incredible. And that whole systemic regulation thing seems to be the key to the ICU study, right?
Yes, the 2015 Chinese database study.
They analyzed critically ill adults in the intensive care unit and found that giving these trauma patients calcium supplementation significantly improved both their 28-day and 90-day survival rates. Like, it literally saved lives.
Because when a patient is in the ICU, their body is undergoing catastrophic stress. Cells are damaged, and they begin leaking vital electrolytes. If calcium levels crash, cellular communication breaks down entirely.
Leading to systemic organ failure.
Exactly. Supplementing calcium acts as a biological anchor. It maintains biological homeostasis in the blood so that organs can keep communicating while the body tries to heal.
Speaking of bodily stress, there was a fascinating 2016 U.S. military study conducted at Natick and Fort Eustis. Basic training is notorious for causing stress fractures in recruits. So they gave them snack bars fortified with 2,000 milligrams of calcium and vitamin D.
Now, earlier we established that high doses of calcium can block iron absorption. And for a soldier carrying 80 pounds of gear, an iron deficiency means a catastrophic drop in oxygen and energy.
But the fortified snack bars protected their bones beautifully. They had over 80% compliance, and it successfully protected bones without altering their iron status at all.
That is a massive win.
It really was. However, it wasn't all victories in the clinical data. There were some major disappointments and warnings.
Because science is rarely clean.
Right. For years, there was this strong hypothesis that calcium and vitamin D could prevent colorectal adenomas, which are benign tumors in the colon. But a 2015 North Carolina study tracked over 2,200 participants, flooded them with calcium and vitamin D, and absolutely nothing happened.
Yeah, it did not reduce the incidence of the tumors at all. The researchers were totally baffled.
They really were. And we also need to address a red flag from a 2015 German and Austrian study. They looked at 1,600 people and found an association between regular calcium supplementation and atrial fibrillation, irregular heartbeat.
Now, they heavily cautioned this wasn't definitive proof of cause and effect.
Right.
But it proves that throwing isolated minerals at the heart's electrical system isn't without risk.
Okay, I want to end on the most famous source of calcium on Earth theory, because the data had some wild twists here. First, a 2016 Chinese meta-analysis spanning 32 studies completely debunked a rumor linking dairy intake to lung cancer.
Which is good news.
Definitely. But the final study, this one challenges decades of nutritional dogma.
You're talking about the 2016 Boston and Stockholm study.
Yes. Researchers tracked over 18,000 middle-aged and older women over an 11-year period, specifically looking at how dairy affected weight change. For as long as I can remember, the advice for weight control was skim milk, fat-free yogurt, low-fat everything.
Oh, absolutely.
But this study found that greater intake of high-fat dairy products was associated with less weight gain over that decade. And the absolute kicker, low-fat dairy offered zero weight control benefits. Full-fat cheddar actually outperformed the diet versions.
What's fascinating here is how all these seemingly disconnected studies, from lowering blood pressure to surviving the ICU to weight control, paint this highly nuanced portrait.
It's not just about strong bones.
Right. Calcium is not a magic bullet for everything, as the tumor study proved, but its systemic impact proves it acts as a fundamental biological regulator.
So what does this all mean? If you take nothing else away from this deep dive, remember that taking care of your bone bank is highly strategic. You can't just blindly swallow a massive pill. You need vitamin D, you have to split your doses to 500 milligrams, and you need the right form citrate versus carbonate for your stomach.
It leaves us with an incredibly profound question to explore, though.
What's that?
Well, notice how a high intake of isolated calcium from a supplement spikes the blood and is associated with kidney stones, but calcium naturally woven into food isn't.
Yeah, because of the slow digestion.
Exactly. Or consider the dairy paradox we just talked about. The highly processed, low-fat dairy failed to help with weight control, but the intact, full-fat, natural dairy succeeded.
Because the natural version contains the fats and proteins that govern how it's utilized.
Right. It raises a profound question about nutrition. Perhaps our bodies are fundamentally designed to process whole packaged foods far better than isolated nutrients extracted into a pill. It's a powerful reminder to look at the whole diet, not just the chemical element.
That is such a brilliant point for you to mull over. You desperately need that 1% in your blood to stay alive today, and you need the 99% in your bones to stand tall tomorrow. But how you deliver it to your body changes everything. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Go have a piece of full-fat cheese, rethink your supplement timing, and we will catch you on the next one.